Okay. Nothing like thrown in at the deep end. Um, so I'm big background. I'm in sales. I've been doing sales for a very, very long time, and as we all know, that the sales world and it's quite up and down. Certainly with the companies that you go and work for and how they operate. So I decided to come out and set up my own business. So I then coach and train. I used to be sales teams, putting sales teams into companies, which I've done an awful lot of. Now I've found that I want to bridge the gap more between CEOs and, and employees, because there seems to be a big gap of understanding. And then, the culture within companies as well really gets quite affected by that. And I find that a lot of CEOs and leadership management don't, because they've never done the job themselves, don't really fully understand of where they need to come from. So I just try and bridge that gap, really, just to just make life a lot easier
Yeah.
for these companies and sales teams, because it's a hard role in itself.
Yeah. Sounds like amazing work. Yeah. So welcome, Carla.
Thank you.
Andrea, you want to introduce yourself to the rest of the team? I mean, we got to know each other, but I don't think everybody was on call when you were introducing yourself.
Who, me still? No,
No,
I
Andrea.
was, I was going to
Oh,
say.
okay. I don't know where I went. I'm Andrea Ballou. I'm out of Phoenix, Arizona, in the States. I've been a member of Global Chamber for about a year, and I came in as a coach to conduct the positive intelligence group that Global Chamber did a while back. And Connie and I did that. That's how I know Connie and I, Kadansky and I go back a ways. Anyway, so I am an authentic leadership and speech coach. So I help people get up on stage. I help them, I always say speakers lead and leaders speak. And so I often get engaged with folks on a speaking level, and then I go into their leadership coaching because it's not always about speaking. And I work with teams. I work with individuals, just across the board. And my frame of reference is to speak from your authentic voice, to lead from your authentic voice. It's an inside out job.
Lovely. Thank you, Andrea. And Beatrice, you want to introduce yourself to us?
Hello, everyone. Beatriz Rodriguez. I'm Venezuelan, but I'm in Brazil, in Valinhos. And I started a few months ago in Global Chamber. I have a consulting company in quality assurance, industrial microbiology, open innovation, and I do coaching too. So this is me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I am Maxina Tong. I am your host for today. Not sure what we'll talk about, but I think we have some things in common. It seems that we're all coaches. We all recognize, we all work with leaders in different ways, whether it's through speech, starting with the sales journey, or helping them bridge the gap between the leader and the teams. I also work in the space of leadership as well as team development. And so I thought for today, I've been playing with the word assertive for the year. So I thought that today we could talk about that assertiveness, because I'm sure each of you bring that special word into the work that you do. How do you show up in front of a client without having that confidence? And what happens when you do it? So I wanted to share a little bit of research around the word assertive, and for us to have a discussion around sharing our experiences around when we've been challenged to be assertive, what tips and tricks we have for each other to really be assertive, so that, we leave here being a little more confident, a little more aware of what we can do to really show up in front of the clients the way that we want to. Does that sound okay for you? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I was looking at a little piece of research. I'm just going to share a presentation that I have, not that one. I was looking at some research on being assertive, and the words assertive penalty came up. Apparently, there was a 2015 study, and in that 2015 study, it really said that women suffer from an emotion inequality that punishes women for being assertive. So I'm just going to share just a few slides so that you can see it, and we could share if we find any truth in that. So this is the assertive penalty, which is an emotion inequality effect that punishes women more than men, and that women are burdened. And the reason why the penalty emerged is because women are thought of culturally, traditionally, to be caring and nurturing. And when we advocate for ourselves, and when we are forceful in our opinions, it violates these cultural norms. And therefore, we are judged more harshly for showing the same degree of assertiveness as men. And this was a 2015 study by 2 researchers that concluded that our perceived competency drops by 35%, and that we are thought to deserve $15,000 less compensation when we are assertive. So I wanted to know if that resonates with you in any way, one, and two, for us to really discuss how we navigate those circumstances and what we can do to really be more assertive, or to be assertive as we conduct our work, meet our clients, negotiate our contracts, get paid for what we're worth. And some of you would have been successful doing that, and some of you would have been less successful. So I think if we share our journeys, we could probably leave here all with a better understanding of some steps we can take to be more assertive. So first question, has anybody ever suffered a assertive penalty? So you want to share your stories? I could take this off. So can you share how that experience was for you, or how you experienced that assertive penalty? So I guess I could share first and then get it warmed up. So I've spent, so there are a number of ways in which this assertive penalty has affected me personally. One, the age factor is a real big one. When I was younger, my voice was less listened to. And of course, it was about, you think you know everything. Basically that, women don't behave the way that you do. And I worked in a lot of male-dominated industries. So I worked mainly in oil and gas, and I worked in insurance. So it became a sort of catch-22 position. I needed to speak up for myself and advocate for myself because I was in this male-dominated arena. And when I did, it was like, you're not a woman, because it wasn't seen as feminine. It wasn't, and my background, added to that, I come from a small Caribbean country where traditional rules for men and women are still something that is adhered to. It's breaking down slightly, but it's still adhered to. So when I was a younger person, it really was girls are seen and not heard. And it really was that considering being feminine means not putting your voice into the room in a way. You needed to sort of put your voice in the room in a way it will not offend men. Put your voice into a room in a way in which you're asking for permission. So there are a lot of ways in which, even though people know that I was smart and that I was intelligent and I was competent, I was not always liked. So I felt that assertive penalty. And I would imagine, and sometimes I remind myself, because my niece is 14 and I want her to be assertive and I want her to know how to navigate the world and set boundaries. And I have to remind myself not to be ageist. When she speaks in a certain way, not to be offended and say, that didn't sound like how a girl should sound, or how a 13-year-old should speak to an older person. I really have to control that, because that ageism, in terms of labeled under words like respect, under words of being feminine, it really gets very, very cloudy. So it's something that I stay in awareness of as an older woman, to make sure that when I'm speaking to younger women, that the ageism around their being assertive does not come up for me. Yeah. Any thoughts or anything you want to share?
I think you covered quite a lot there. No, it was really interesting to hear because obviously culturally as well and your background, because I would say from my background as well, my voice was probably very similar to yours, quite small, certainly because I, whether it's a female thing, I don't know about everybody else, but it's a case of I like to read the room first. And when you do walk into a male dominated room, I've been in a lot of male dominated rooms. I still am they don't bother me anymore because it's now I'm used to them. So it is a case of, is it so much, I suppose what I'm trying to say, is it so much against the women or is it really against the environment that we're walking into? Because we're just not naturally used to it because this environment's been going on for such a long time and we're walking into this environment now. So is it a case of just learning, understanding it, and then once it is, and it is, I think it's an element of educating men as well, because and I think that came about from my son mainly because he joined the army. Now he's in the front line of the army, and in the UK, because I'm based in London, they have now allowed females to join his regiment and his battalion. And so I had a good conversation with him, and I said, "How do you feel about that? Because there's a physical difference, on the front line for male and for females." And he said, "We don't have a problem with that, Mum. It's not basis, but what we do find the problem is that this environment's been going on for a very long time." And then suddenly we have to watch what we're saying because it's now found offensive. And we had a great conversation about that. And I thought, well, there's not very difference between that and sometimes the boardroom, if I'm honest. But that's from my experience. That was just wanting to add into that. I don't know if anybody's had the same.
My experience is related with project management. You know that you need to map obstacles to be able to prevent or mitigate risk. So when was my opportunity to communicate those obstacles, I was a troublemaker and not a person that want to prevent things. And this was associated with the gender and the expectation that I should be quiet instead of mapping the obstacles and recommending the actions to prevent them. And this happened several times and required additional work from my side to mitigate the problems that in relationship at work that this cause. But I used to manage that. When you know the person, sometimes you can communicate the same thing in a different way. For example, I learned that with one of my peers, that it's better to align with the person first and then communicate the whole thing in public as a teamwork instead as only my idea. This works much better than just being there and pointing to what can be wrong. So this was one example of many.
Thank you. And Andrea? Oh, and Deborah. Yeah, and then we'll go to Deborah. Deborah, when you'll introduce yourself to us after Andrea and just share on the question. Yeah, thank you for joining. Go ahead, Andrea.
Gosh, Maxine, when you said, have you ever had that happen? I thought, let me count the ways. Because it's been a consistent thread. Although I will say that when I was very young, when I was about 20, I spent a year on the road in a performing context. And I met a lot of very famous, both celebrities and men in high positions in companies. And at that time, I mean, I was in a different role, but I realized that they're just humans, right? They're just people, and they're just as, and so when I started working in the corporate arena and started having clients, that's how I saw them. And what that allowed me to do is just walk in, whether I was 23 or I was 30 or I was whatever, and I just present my information, and I didn't allow their status to make a difference. Now, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't get in groups of men, because I've been in business for a long time, and that I wouldn't get some of that kind of response. In fact, one CEO I worked with literally put a glass ceiling on me. And I was looking at financial PR at the time. He goes, well, women don't really do that, you know? So it was that I did get these like direct and indirect kind of opportunities to take a look. But as I've gotten older, I think the conviction that I have that I have something that's going to serve and be really helpful in that conviction, and maybe I don't have as much estrogen anymore. So I don't care. And I think that that really helps because I have much more authority in how I show up. Right? It's not even on the table. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. Okay, you're not for me, I'm not for you. I've actually had the reverse happen where I've had to learn to be more assertive because I've had speaking of sales, my brother-in-law, one time I was working with a CEO of a international corp and I was trying to sell him on something and I hadn't heard back. And he goes, well, you'll probably know what this is. I didn't, Carla. Do the assumptive sell, like just assume you've got it. And send him an email and say, here's the invoice. And I'm like, seriously? So I did. And he goes, great. I mean, and so if anything, I've had to learn to be more assertive with men because that's how they play. And I didn't know the rules. And
That's
so
exactly
it's been very interesting to me. So yes, on the one hand, I've certainly suffered from perceptions and ageism and sexism and all of that. And on the other hand, I've had to learn some new rules because I didn't know them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And so we'll go to Deborah. And for those of you who just joined the call, welcome. Today we are just discussing the assertive penalty, which was a 2015 study that showed that women suffer an emotion inequality because traditionally and culturally we are seen as being nurturing and caring. And when we're assertive, it sort of bucks against that. So we are penalized for it. In fact, the penalties are real. We are seen as being 35% less competent, and we are thought to deserve 15,000 less compensation. And that was in 2015, so I don't know what it is right now. So I do recognize, so for people who didn't, when you are speaking, we have Deborah next, and then we'll go to Siobhan. When you are speaking, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and apologies if I pronounce any names incorrectly. You will correct me when you come on. And just tell us about your experience with the assertive penalty if you've had any. So Deborah, you're on. Deborah, I believe you're muted, or we're not hearing you. So we can come back to Deborah and let's go to Shaw, and you will tell me how to pronounce your first name.
Hi, Maxine.
Hi.
You pronounced it perfectly. It's Siobhan, and it's an Irish name. And I believe my parents were having cocktails when they decided on it. It was between Laura and Siobhan. So I've had a conversation opener for every event I've ever gone to because people usually butcher my name. So I appreciate that you actually knew how to pronounce it. I'm the co-founder of Growing to Give, and I have never had an issue with being too assertive or being seen as too assertive. I have been told that I've been intimidating, which is interesting. But what I get a lot, because I come in as my authentic self. What you see is what you get. You know, those personality tests that they do in corporations. I'm over here. I don't have my personality is what I present to the world. That's what I am at home, and it's what I present to the world. So I've been called ditzy and flaky by male superiors, let's call them, so bosses. But I'm a promoter, I'm a relationship builder, I'm a networker. I'm a nurturer. That's my go-to personality. That's what I feel comfortable in. If you're not in alignment with me, that's not my problem, right?
Yeah.
So I think that and it's got to be the same with women who are assertive. And I've worked in the film industry, and a lot of the women in the film industry are very assertive. They have to be. It's a male dominated industry at the top. And so I have some really good friends that complain that, they're being called the B word, and, they're too assertive and they need to sit down and shut up, right? That type of thing. And so I can relate to them, because on the opposite spectrum, I'm being labeled as a ditz. I mean, when I heard that the first time, it was probably more than once I've heard that, I was shocked. I was like, no, I'm just being me, and this is who I am. Take it or leave it. But I think it comes down to, you have to look for those people that you can feel in alignment with. If your energy is off, you have to walk away, or you have to just sort of go, okay, I need to come at this a different angle. I can't go in, busting busting heads and things like that. So but I also think that men are learning to deal with women, because I've heard men telling me, just listen to those women talking, it sounds like a bunch of chickens. Like, it's like, seriously? No, we're just having a great conversation, and we're excitable, and we laugh, and we're joyful, and we love communicating with each other. That's who we are. So it really does come down to finding the alignment, what works for you, and just standing up for yourself, saying, this is who I am. If you don't like it, we're not in alignment, and we'll just move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Siobhan. And I think those words are that's a great example. The words that say, I mean, I don't even want to recognize it, but it's a great example of being seen as 35% or more less competent than you are, because you're assertive, because you are in your authentic self, either take me or you don't. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Deborah, you want to try again and come on? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that. I've had problems with Zoom's audio. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So I own an international executive search firm, and I place C-suite executives, and most of my clients are private equity firms, placing people within the firm or portfolio. And I don't know if anybody knows about that world, but they're mostly very it's male dominated, a lot of money, and Ivy Leaguers. So when I first started years ago, I have a male business partner also. And I would go into a meeting that I got, and there would be 2 or 3 men across the table from the private equity firm, my business partner and I. And the whole conversation, eye contact went to my partner. And like, it was like you didn't even exist in the meeting, even though you're the one that arranged it, set it up. And I will tell you, it was the worst feeling in the world. Like, you just felt like this big in that room. And the other thing too, I don't know if anybody experienced, but I'm barely 5'3", and 110 pounds. If you're not a tall woman going into a room, you're automatically judged that you're just a small person. Does that make sense to anybody? And so just this last year, so I've been doing this 25 years, I've pretty much overcome that challenge. It still happens, but you have to insert yourself into the conversation intentionally, otherwise you will get overlooked every time. But I brought on 2 rock star women in the search business this last year. In that all they do is private equity. And I will tell you, we could run the world. They are the sharpest gals, and it's just so frustrating that you walk in and you're not, you can't even get eye contact or even be part of the conversation. So I think according, based on what Andrea said too about just, you meet all different kinds and you kind of have to be a chameleon as to who's your audience to even be heard. And I have, the whole glass ceiling with women trying to make it into high level jobs is so true. And it's a battle. But I think if you can just put your stake in the ground, I guess, from the beginning of the meeting or whatever. And sometimes it is being assertive. But that's been my experience. And I will tell you, at first, it was awful.
Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. And the arc of the story is so important. And one thing that's coming through for a lot of the contributions is really becoming comfortable with ourselves. So whether or not we're accepted, rejected, we are okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that story. Anybody else wants to share their experience of an assertive penalty that they may have faced and how they may have faced it? We've heard about, there are some things that are added on to it, right? It gets a little cloudy. So size matters, right? When you walk into a room and you're a petite woman, how you're treated. We heard about age. When it is that you are, you're younger, you tend to be treated differently. We also, there's a hand up. Go right ahead. Go ahead, Gloria.
I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute when I coughed. Forgot about that. No, I'm Gloria Peterson, and my story is decades old, but you know what? I don't think the situation is. But there's a message here for everyone, one that I learned. I was working for a very, very large international manufacturing company. We dealt a lot with Germany at that particular time. And I heard about a coursework that was being offered by the company that was free. It was a very expensive course, but it was free. Anything that's free, I wanted to take because I wanted to advance myself. And I certainly didn't want to stay in the position I was there, it was administrative, but it wasn't sales and marketing. Well, the course was for sales and marketing, but I went to HR and I said, I really want to take this course that sales and marketing is taking because it sounds intriguing. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering what that course is, it was a Dale Carnegie. And I didn't know what it was. I really didn't at that time. And of course, he said no. And I thought, well, why not? I didn't see myself as a woman wanting a job, not a job, but a course. I mean, I didn't see it as me as a woman trying to break through the man wall, if you will. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as me as a person, an individual, wanting to take a course to advance myself. I mean, that was what was in my head. And they said no. The second time I went in, I said, no, I really want to take this course, and this is why I want to take it. And because there's a lot of pink slipping going on, I might be at risk. And if I'm going to be at risk, I want to be prepared. And I think this course will help me. And he still said no. And I thought, oh, you can't tell me no. And so I thought about it for a while. Then it dawned on me. The second vice president of this very huge company, his last name was Lewis. His name was Walt Lewis, by the way. And I went to high school with a Lewis, and I wonder if Steve Lewis is related to Walt Lewis. And Walt always walked the floor during lunchtime because he liked to meet the engineers. And this particular day, he was walking by, and I said, Mr. Lewis. And he goes, yes. Really surprised that I acknowledged him walking by and asked him to come over, and I wanted to speak to him. By the way, are you related to a Steve Lewis? And he says, well, yeah, that's my son. Oh, then I was also very active. I think you have to look at your resources, the message I'm giving you. Then I also noticed that because I was very involved in the YWCA at the time, I said, and there's a Lewis on the board of directors at the YWCA. Is she in any way related to you? It's his wife. And he says, Miss Peterson, you're up to something. What do you want? And I told him, I said that I need a vice president signature. I think that will get me into this course. I really want to take it, and I don't know what it's about. But he says, well, I'm all about women advancing. So he said, what do you want me to do? I said, you have to sign this paper right here. And he signed it, and I took it in, and I got to take the course. But I think that when you are up against the man wall, my message to you here is don't think of yourself as a woman trying to achieve that particular position or effort or whatever. Think of yourself as a person who's bound and determined to take something to advance herself, to better herself, or whatever the case may be. Because I think when you start to see yourself as a woman, as a weaker sex, you become weaker. Just don't see yourself that way. And that was a lesson I learned. And that lesson has carried me forward. And it has caused me to change directions in many aspects of my life. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, thank you, Gloria. And the gems that you shared, that idea of networking, what we call networking, that's exactly what you did, who's in my little Rolodex? Who did I go to school with? How can they help me now?
Yeah.
And yet also being able to put your voice into the room to say, hey, I have a want. A good friend of mine, Connie Kadansky, some of you know her, she always says, get your ask in gear. And that's the thing about being assertive, that what we want is important, not as a weaker sex, as Gloria says, as a person wanting something, to be deliberate about it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to go, one of the things that Gloria said, which was echoed in one of the early presentations, was the idea of joining. We're not outside of the system, we are in the system. So going up to somebody, Mr. Lewis, and making those connections, joining him, meeting him where he is, and then taking him on a journey to say, this is what I want. Yeah, thanks a lot, Gloria. Anybody else wants to share? I mean, I have a list of things here. It's like amazing. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Anita Rodal, president of SBPI Services. I do corporate currency exchange, elevator pitch training, and accent reduction. So I'm a middle child, which means that I butt heads with everybody, male or female. I look at everybody as competition and who's going to beat up on me, because that was the story of my life. It took my older sister, my younger sister, the two of them to pin me down and get the better of me growing up. So while I don't feel like I've had issues with being held back, because fortunately, two of the most significant jobs I ever had, it was a woman that interviewed me. One, we butted heads a little bit, but she loved me because I've always been in outside sales, well, mostly, and I got the job done, so she loved me. The other one was in a clinical position in the hospital, and we ended up being business partners. But I did have a Me Too moment many, many years ago, and I've never told anybody, Beatriz, not even Alec. And it was brief, it was limited, and in retrospect, I do know that if it had gone on for one more second, he would have gotten an elbow to his solar plexus. And I didn't recognize it as a Me Too thing at the time, because this was in the 80s, the late 80s. But when the whole Me Too thing, came out several years ago, revolved, I was kind of shocked to realize that, oh my God, it happened to me too, literally. So that was interesting.
And thanks for sharing that, Anita. And the gems from your story would be the throw the ladder down moments, where some of us who are in leadership positions, as well as in positions to network, that we can throw the ladder down to younger women to really help them assert themselves, to find their comfort levels, to recognize what they can possibly be excelling at, and giving them that boost. Maybe not, not a position, maybe, but that boost, which really goes a long way to helping them become more assertive. And I think definitely in most women's lives, whether we recognize it in the moment or after the moment, in terms of how subtle or how aggressive it may have been, a lot of us have Me Too stories. So, and I have mine as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that's one of the big threats, right? It's like, it's always a threat because it's words, it's deeds, and it could be as subtle as it is or as magnified as it is. And it's something that's real for us. And it is about, we mentioned it before when the story was shared about the son who's in the army. The context of the world we're living in, it keeps shifting and it keeps changing. So how it looked 30 years ago may not be how it looks now. And the issue is same, it's just that it changes a little bit. I mean, we have joined the workforce maybe 100 years later than men, and the workforce still has not adjusted to all of us at the same time. So leave the space open. Anyone else who wants to share? You know, I'm getting some gems here, so thank you everybody who's contributed thus far.
Okay, I'd like to say something to Deborah Young. Didn't you talk about your height, right? Okay, well, I'm 5'2", same weight. Okay, so I know what you're saying. But one of the things I've learned as a quote short person and petite is that you really, first of all, I was born with heels on. That helps. I always tell people that because I wear heels to give me that extra inch or two. But I think you have to walk into a room, but you have to walk tall and think tall. And if you walk in tall, because this is what I do, networking events, you know, wherever I go to, is I think tall, I walk tall, and I don't think of my height. And even if somebody like Doug Monkey is like way towering over me, I might ask that we have a conversation seated, because when you're seated, you're all about the same. There's not the height differential when you're seated, but when you're standing, there is. And another thing you can do that I do is when I'm standing around people, men or women, you know, women can be just as intimidated as men that are tall. Trust me on that one. I just step back a little bit and create a little bit more distance. And if you step back with a little bit more distance, you don't seem as short and they don't seem as tall. So I think you have to go into the mindset and you have to train your mind to think of yourself as tall and create the environment that makes you think less of it. But I think sometimes the smallest woman, the shortest one, I mean, Madeleine Albright, come on, look at her. She's 4'11", 4'10". You have to think of women like that. I mean, she never let it stop her. And I met her and I was shocked that I was taller than her. That just totally shocked me. And the other thing that shocked me is when I went to talk to her at her desk, I stood by the side of her desk. She sits on 3 cushions. And I thought, you know, whatever you need to do, you make it work. And so she was kind of like my icon as far as being short and not feeling powerful. But you look at somebody like her and she is powerful. And yes, you know,
Yeah.
so don't ever let height be a barrier, if you will.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Gloria. I know sometimes when people meet me, they say, "Oh, we didn't know you were so short." It's like, okay. Now you know, and that's the beauty of Zoom, right? On Zoom, we're all tall. Yeah. Anybody else wants to share before yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Well, I think what it comes down to and I work a lot with people on this in terms of their presence, right? Is that we all are very powerful. We all have influence. We all matter. And whether we're aware of it or not, it's just part and parcel to who we are. So when you own that, when you just own that you matter and that you make a difference right there, then it's really just about courage, you know, to allow yourself. We have a different perspective than men in many ways. And I think of one time when I had been coaching all these guys like these, and they're international presidents of companies and all this in speaking. And they would show up in front on the stage, and I'm there basically coaching them in this. And they'd show up and say things that were like, you know, if you wanted to create a fence in your audience, you got it, you know? And so I would sit down with them afterwards and I would really connect with them on that. Like, what is it you're wanting to create? What are you wanting to do here? And they appreciate, at least the ones you want to work with, they appreciate and respect that kind of direct, honest feedback. At least that's what I found. When I said to them, look, and the compassion, the empathy, that's a strength. They appreciate it. I can understand how you feel like you need to show up that way because you've had to fight your way to the top. And now you don't have to anymore. You got the job, right? So now you can invite your team in. You can start maybe in a different way. And that kind of direct communication they need that. They want that. And it doesn't matter the package that it comes in. At least that's the approach that I take. It's just for me to have the courage to show up and deliver what I can. And if they're not the kind of people that want that, don't try to change them. Find a different avenue. Kind of like Gloria said, you want to kind of go around or whatever, because it's a waste of your time to try to change somebody who's not going to be able to see or hear you. I spent a lot of time trying to do that, and I don't do it anymore. And so I just find a different avenue or say, sayonara if I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I think, what I'm hearing a lot is that sense of self. So whether we want to call it being assertive, whether we want to call it confidence, is really being so sure of what you have to offer and so sure that you will find your right people to connect with, that the other people do not matter. And I think that's wisdom. That comes with a certain amount of discernment, a certain amount of trial and error. And so it sort of land on this place where you're pretty intentional and deliberate about, this is my community, this is not. This is my client, this is not. And just a reminder for everybody, I know some people are doing it in the chat, you could drop your information in the chat so we could keep in touch with each other and share. And I have a gift for you. I'll put it in the chat. And the gift is really just it's called the A to Z Women's Companion. Is just a quick 26 tips that I share with women, female professionals, whether you're a leader or aspiring to really just help you navigate this world. We all have experiences, and there's so many things here that we've shared today, and I will do a synopsis just about 10 minutes before the call. I'll put it in, so I'll make the notes so everybody could glean all the learnings. So we have space for other people to share. Tamina, I know you said you so needed to hear this today. Can you share with us what's happening and just a little bit about yourself as well? If you can, come on.
Well, good morning. I'm Tamina. I am an immigration attorney in Seattle. I have my own practice. I've been practicing since 2009. And one of the specialties, if you like, that I have carved out is working with startup companies. I have a series of books on this issue. And when I started writing about this, working with startups, this is about 2009 when the previous recession was happening and big companies were laying people off. I realized that a visa specifically for startups would be a great solution. So that's really what put me on the map. And not a lot of people were focusing on that issue. But fast forward to 2022, 2023, for, people, there are a lot of lawyers in trying to get in this space or in this space. And I have to, sometimes as a human, we can't help but think about, am I doing enough? Did I do enough? How am I setting myself apart? And I think what I've realized is I am me. I have established myself. I have done so much that I should not worry about anything else. I should just continue to express what I can do for people and be the person who can bring value. So what you said earlier, that this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table. I have to, in the 2024, I keep reminding myself, it's January 31st, but it's this new year is a new me of just really taking that forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. So we are echoing what the voice in your head and what you've been saying to yourself. Yeah, there are no mistakes. I believe, whoever shows up, these are the people who have the messages to bring and the people who need to hear the messages that we are bringing at this point in time. Thank you so much, Tamina. Anybody else wants to share with us before we move? We have about just a little under 20 minutes, so we have space for other sharing. Let's see. Ruby, do you want to share anything with us today?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So I am based in Accra, Ghana, and I'm in the business of helping companies looking to expand to Ghana or other parts of Africa. So I would like to take it from the angle of traditions. So typically in the African context, women are being looked down by men. You can be in a room with men and they wouldn't want to give you the floor, with the thinking that you don't have anything to contribute. But thankfully, this is gradually changing, especially in Ghana, where we have a lot of women groups such as this one, and women are beginning to voice out their issues and letting the men know that, look, we have this in control. So it's really very refreshing to hear from all of you and your experiences, and it's giving me more confidence to go out there and speak out and speak for other women as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. And the context and the change in times, it's such a great time to be a woman, right? Because we've seen it all. I mean, we've seen women presidents and around the world, and it's good. It's a good time, and it's a good time for traditions to morph a little bit to include us differently. Carla, you had your hand up.
I did, yes. I really just wanted to jump on the back of what Deborah was saying earlier about height. And I've seen this plenty of times, but just from a different perspective, and also Gloria as well. I'm 5'7.5", so I'm not exactly tiny, but I would still even say I went through a period of time at that height, still feeling quite small in environments, and certainly when it's in a very male-dominated environment. So I used to put on the killer heels. I really did, because I used to try and make myself, because I could at 5'7", be eye level, because I had to go in there and go, you will see me, you will see me. And it worked, and I realized it worked, but it worked as well. And it worked better for me when I realized that I still had to keep my nurturing kind of feminine side. So I found the balance between the masculinity and matching them there, and then having the nurturing side, because that's what I kind of do now, because I notice there's a gap between leadership and employees. And I find that more females in that kind of space and scope can bridge that gap through their nurturing personalities and the nurturing side. And men are listening. I don't know what it's like across the pond, but I do find here men are starting to listen and actually bridge that gap totally. But do I still want to walk in with my heels on? Yes, I do. Purely because it's still needing to be changed and it's still needing to be tweaked. And until it does, until I feel comfortable not doing so, I'll still do it.
Yeah.
No, Carla, I'd like to
rock on.
Okay,
Go
I'd
ahead.
like to ask you if you don't mind. I'm sorry I interrupted, but I wanted to get this to her before we moved on to somebody else. How do you, being tall, which I can't relate to, but being tall, right away I thought about, what about the short men with Napoleon complex? How'd you handle them?
Well, I
there
know
are short men with Napoleon complexes.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I think sometimes with the Napoleon complex, you're going to get that anyway, aren't you? You really are going to get that anyway. So that's really down to them having complexes. But I often find that shorter men and smaller men, they do have more confidence, because I still think they've had to still have that fight themselves, even though they're on, they are males. They still have those same issues, and I think we still need to recognize that for them as well. And I think if you can relate to somebody with the same issue, rather than what sex you are, that's where you can build your relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I love two things there that you expressed. One around not losing our femininity. That, and it's so interesting in the world of leadership, how everything has come back to emotional intelligence and teaching leaders empathy, which is our secret sauce, right? That's one of the things that women do naturally. We are naturally empathetic. So in a way, the world is coming to us. Words like vulnerability, awareness, those are really the words now that leaders are being challenged to actually embrace in their leadership styles, regardless of what style they do. But those are words that we want to keep in the essence of it. And we naturally do that. So maybe it's just an evolving time where we begin to see our assertiveness. We don't need to be in the face, as we've all been saying today, just standing in our power, putting our voice out there, recognizing this is not my pond, right? I could swim somewhere else. Anybody else before we move into wrap up? It's been, I'm just really grateful for being here today and hearing all of the wisdom that each of you has shared. Sarah, do you want to share anything with us today?
No, I'm echo your sentiments, Maxine. This has been an incredibly amazing session today. Hearing from all of you, you all are very strong women, very seasoned in your careers. Is something, someone like me who's very, new to starting my own business can really benefit from all the wisdom you've shared. I've been writing notes to myself of things that I can do and take after this. And no, I mean, for me personally, I think it's been like a lot of this has resonated. I personally end up being too nice. I'm sort of that nicer person. I'm from the South in the US. We're always, a little bit nicer, that Southern hospitality. I'm shorter too, I think that, being nice and that always resonates with me, but I'm trying to find that balance of standing up for myself and being able to, as a businesswoman, as a business leader, being able to stand up for myself and making sure, I'm making the right business decisions at the end of the day. So that for me is, just finding that balance, especially in a male dominated field. I'm in the AI space. So I've always been data technology, always surrounded by men my entire career. So it's just finding that balance and just being true to myself and who I am, but then, making sure I'm showing up for my business too. But I really appreciate all your advice today. This has been really, really incredible.
Thank you. The sharing of stories is so powerful that, without even lecturing, we get so much from it. So thank you, everybody who shared. Andrea, you want to share? Thank you, Sarah.
Well, very briefly, just what Sarah said about being nice. I have a good friend who's also a coach, and she said this to me one time, and it just reframed it. She goes, I am not nice, I am good. And that's a whole different, I am good. I'm a good person. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not nice. It's a very,
It's
so I
different.
just wanted to share that.
Yeah, download the book that I put in, the free book that I put in the chat. There is a little bit on that word called nice. And yeah, I do share that sentiment. Thank you for saying that. Let me see if there's anybody else who probably didn't speak this morning. Leanne, yeah, you want to share something with us? Go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leanne. I'm from New Zealand. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you all so much for your stories. It's been amazing. The thing that I've loved most about it is hearing that we're all in the similar positions all around the world. It doesn't actually matter where we are in the world. So yeah, I would just want to thank you for that. And I've learned a lot, and I really enjoyed listening to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne, and welcome. I love the tone of your voice. It's very calming.
Oh, thanks. I'm often told that. I've had people ask me to do the voiceovers for them because they said they could listen to me all day, which is most people hate the sound of their own voice, so I never really think about that. But
yeah, well, you can assert that today. Let's
thank
see.
you.
You're welcome. Victory, do you have anything to share with us? Let's see. Donoki, do you have anything to share with us? And Kat? And Hyung. It's okay if you don't share as well. That's fine. We have about 6 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll move into wrap up. I didn't see any other hands up, so we're good. So the first thing is gratitude, right? Gratitude for being in community in this special space and sharing and learning the lessons. And so some of the things that we shared today, really stood out with me, that context. We are operating in a world that is changing. Areas and traditions that are changing and shifting. So you have places like the Caribbean, places like Ghana, where it was more rigid than maybe in the US and other northern countries, or Western Hemisphere, I should say. And we see some breaking down of those barriers. Some of the things I got from today was that while that is changing, we still have an onus to join in a manner that is comfortable to us. So we're entering a group, entering an organization, whether it is to do our work or whether we are employed or whether we are contracting with other people. We want to join in a way that suits us and really represents who we are. So that presence, the word presence was also used today. How are we being deliberate and intentional about the way that we join a space or join a client or engage with a client? We want to be able to honor who we are, show up as authentically us, and accept that not all spaces are for us. And that may be a hard one to swallow, right? Because if you're accustomed being a high achiever, etc., and people reject you, it might feel like a lot. We have to come to terms with that some spaces are not for us. We need to use our networks, use our resources to get into those cracks and ask for what we want. Gloria's story resonates, and really she shared that, right? An admonition that we need to know the rules. We want to go into a space, yes, we want to assert ourselves, but do we know the basics of the organization? Do we know who's really the decision maker? We need to know the rules to play the game. And we need to accept that our physical limitations, whether it's our age or our height, even though there may be limitations, there's still ways in which we can work around it. And we got some workarounds today. The word alignment was used more than once for us to be in alignment with who we really are. And again, entering spaces that may not be in alignment with us. Are we going to stay there or are we going to leave? So that sense of, butting against to break that glass ceiling, we have to reconcile if that's something that we really want. So where are we inserting ourselves intentionally? What is good about us and how do we stay on the grind? How do we create distance? How do we maintain our femininity and not just adopt male patterns? Even though there is a recognition that understanding how men work really can help us be more assertive as well. So that's, like lots of learnings. I am like Sarah. I took a lot of notes because these have just been wonderful, wonderful sharing. And so your generosity, I also want to recognize that. So I'd love to, and Gloria saying she did take the course. Yeah, Gloria, we had no doubt after talking to Mr. Lewis that you weren't going to go on that course. Absolutely. So I'll leave the space open. We have about 2 minutes if anybody feels really compelled to share or to give appreciations to any story that you heard. I would leave the room open for that.
I'll just say thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's my first time, so I've thoroughly enjoyed this. So thank you for the for the event.
You're most welcome, Carla. Yeah. Yeah, so I want to thank everybody again for showing up. Make sure we connect with each other, right? We're as strong as our networks. And we know that we could get resources. We have resources. We're not one woman. We are 18 women on this call. And let's stay connected and, ask each other questions and just make it happen while we assert and support each other. So thank you very much for showing up today. It was wonderful to be here with you and to hear your powerful stories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.